the chairman of NSSA, and also I'm Vice President of Corporate Development at LinQuest. Welcome to this week's edition of the Space Time series. I know many of you have joined us in the past several months. We've had a number of these and a very exciting roster of events upcoming. Today is a very special one. Our guest is Lieutenant General J.T. Thompson, the commander of the Space and Missile Center at Space Force. And we're very excited to have General Thompson. General, a few people have commented to me, hey, this is a big day, isn't it? And they thought I was going to respond on the fact that we're electing a president today, and I immediately jumped to my excitement about this venue. So that tells you where my mind is. And I won't comment on what box I checked when I voted in advance, but I can tell you if I had a third box with your name in it, I probably would have checked that box. But enough for the gratuitous comments that are part of the introduction. Our moderator today will be J.R. Riordan. J.R. is the Senior Vice President at Parsons for Space and Geospatial Intelligence. J.R., of course, was on the Seminar Armed Services Committee when the Space Force legislation was formed a year and a half, 2 years ago, is very much one of the architects of that, and is the perfect person to help guide us through this open dialogue with General Thompson. So without further delay, JR, over to you.
Great, Joe. Thanks. And General, thank you so much for your time today, sir. I know you're a very busy man with a broad span of control, and NSSA really appreciates everything you're doing for us. For the folks on the line today, the event overview is really a conversation with industry on space acquisition. Speak freely without having any concern with media. And then overall background, General, I just want to tell folks your great career that you've had so far in taking care of all the great things in space. And I'm not going to give any dates, sir, I promise. But you started out with coming in through the Air Force Academy and served in a variety of scientific acquisition and logistics-oriented capacities, including Air Force Systems Command, Air Force Material Command, and of course in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition. Today, as we know, sir, you're the commander of the Space and Missile Systems Center out at LA. A really, really great job, and 3 years in so far, doing great things. You did, as we all know, came from the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center out at Wright-Pat, commanding 6,000 people and employees nationwide, at about a $9 billion annual budget, which we all do appreciate in industry, just letting you know. Sir, you're the PEO for space, and you've been a PEO overall in your career 5 times. So you're really, really good at it, and we appreciate that. And of course, the SMC mission is the research, design, development, acquisition, and sustainment of all satellites and command and control systems, from military satellite communications to missile warning, navigation, timing, all the way down to space superiority and responsive space overall. And sir, with that, I'd like to turn it over to you for some words for the team here on the call, if you don't mind. We are very proud to host you and want to give you the floor, sir. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that really kind introduction, JR, and to Joe and Steve and the whole NSSA team. I just want to say thanks for giving me this this opportunity. First of all, an apology to those of you who may have tuned in today thinking that you were going to get to hear from the Vice Chief of Space Operations, Space Force 4-star General, my taller and younger but not as good looking brother, 4-star General D.T. Thompson. We continue to get confused, even though the ranks are now different. We continue to get confused across the enterprise. I was in a discussion just last week where a Department of the Air Force SES member at the end of the conversation said, "Oh, by the way, congratulations on your 4th star." So we share emails. We do have very much stuff in common. We were squadron mates at the Air Force Academy. We both share some Western Pennsylvania roots, so go Steelers. But we are different people, and so I'll try and address my comments today from the space acquisition perspective and the SMC commander perspective, not the Vice Chief of Space Operations perspective. I do also understand that our good friend and key member of the team, Colin Lee, isn't able to join us today. He tested positive for COVID, and having done a lot of Zoom calls here over the past 9 months. I'd say that that's probably the most extreme tactic I've used for somebody getting out of a speaking engagement that I was somehow involved in. But in all seriousness, I just want to wish him very good health and a speedy recovery. I wish he could be here with us today, as I know a lot of you do too. I'd really like to thank the audience, I guess is the best way for me to put this, for your dedication to the National Security Space Mission, and to our warfighters all of the time, but especially this year during the global pandemic. It's been one of the most challenging years on record, and the perseverance, innovation, work ethic of the defense industrial base for space has just, overwhelmed me in terms of how sharp the team is. It's great to be a member of it. The way that you all have overcome obstacles to production and development, overcome obstacles like successfully presenting proposals to the government, delivering the capability. I just can't believe when I look at SMC's list of accomplishments over the last 9 months. Believe me, myself and my team understand that that is full teamwork, right? That's not just us doing that. All of those operational acceptances, all of those launches, all of those successful contract awards, all of those successful test events, new capability delivered to the warfighter. It's just really been remarkable. And so thanks to all of you for that. I know during the Q&A today, we're going to get into a totally not controversial topic at all on space acquisition, but I aim to be as absolutely open as I can be. We're looking to make ourselves faster and more responsive. We want to increase space superiority under the United States Space Force. I think that's one of the main reasons we were set up. And so in order to set the stage today, let me just cover a few topics for you. I have been talking frequently in these kind of events about the threat. And I'm not going to do that today because I think the audience here is savvy enough and understands, at least at the unclassified level and probably at much higher levels, the warfighting risks, the economic risks that we have going on in the world today. I mean, if you just take a look at our peer adversaries and their fielding of anti-satellite weapons, their fielding of cyber weapons that are focused in on space systems, their exfiltration through various cyber means of key design data of our space systems, even looking at things like foreign ownership and investment in our space industrial base. You all understand this. The challenge that I would have to all of you, though, and maybe it's particularly relevant that this is happening on Election Day, the challenge that I would give to all of you, regardless of what party is in the White House and what parties are the majority in the House and the Senate, is to keep talking about the threats that we face in the space domain with the American public as you encounter them. If you're given the opportunity to make a speech, cover that topic, cover the threat. If you're out in the backyard having a cookout and you're just talking to your neighbor, talk to him or her about the threat. It's really important that for America, where, like Secretary Barrett says, most Americans use space before their first cup of coffee in the morning. It's really important for Americans to understand what kind of threats are out there. As I move on from that topic, maybe just talk a little bit about innovation in the space realm. All of you are aware that there's probably more than 80 countries now that all have space programs of varying degrees of maturity. If you're familiar with the venture capital firm Space Capital, they're tracking investments in the space industrial base to over 1,100 different companies since 2009, and those investments total to nearly $170 billion. The United States accounts for 48% of that investment, and China officially accounts for 27% of that investment. So we're all really witnessing the future space industrial base being built in real time as new startups, or as I like to call them, change-ups, companies like Google and Amazon who are expanding their sphere of influence into directly more space investments. A lot of these startups and change-ups are being established explicitly to exploit data from the space layer, and most of that exploitation is coming in terms of using data from positioning, navigation, and timing things from the GPS constellation to the benefit of rideshare applications, grocery deliveries, new financial products from a timing perspective, and everything like that. But it's important to note that that new space industrial base is not just trying to exploit existing data from space. They're trying to create new data from space. They're trying to control data from space in new and different ways. They're trying to launch capabilities to space. So things like Earth observation capabilities, small and rapid launch, internet services, all of those things are, let's just say they're improving rapidly at a pace that we're sometimes not used to within the defense space industrial base. The Space Force has got to have the structures and the people to take advantage of that booming market, so to speak. And we have to ensure that we're capturing the right cutting edge or game-changing capabilities to meet critical warfighting gaps. So that same technology that maybe your mother is using to keep in contact with you during the global pandemic, or that same technology that your kids are using to learn in a remote environment during the pandemic, those same technologies may very well have cutting-edge, game-changing applications for the space warfighter. And because of that, that investment in the space industrial base is kind of creating a tsunami of a surf wave, if you will, that we as the government have really got to figure out how to get our surfboards out and ride. And so there's a lot of things that we're doing to try and ride that tsunami better than we have in the past, because we're not driving the pace of technological change the way that the Defense Department has done in the past, in the industrial age, in the Cold War. Our percentage of investment, I think, as Dr. Roper talks about, is somewhere around 20% for R&D, whereas it used to be 70 to 80% for R&D. So how do we take advantage of these new things? Well, one area that we've particularly taken advantage of over the last couple of years is the Space Enterprise Consortium, or SpEC, as we like to call it, which boasts 330 plus non-traditional members out of the over 430 total companies that are partnered with us on that effort. Many of you are aware that the ceiling on that contract is $1.4 billion, and we're in the process of recompeting the SpEC, other transaction agreement management, currently to something that we call SpEC Reloaded. We hope to award that before the end of the year, and that vehicle for prototyping and innovation efforts will be for $12 billion and 10 years, not just available to SMC, but available across the DoD space enterprise for not just SMC, but for NRO and Air Force Research Lab and DAF RCO, Space RCO, anybody who wants to take advantage of it. We've been able to award stuff in less than 90 days routinely on that vehicle. We anticipate that that will only get better over time. And so to be able to rapidly respond, get money to game changers, be able to do that prototyping and innovation, to have general awareness across the 430 plus members about what's going on in the space industrial base and what we're targeting as capabilities we'd like to see in the future, I think is really, really important. And if you're listening in and your business entity that you're involved in is not currently a member of the Space Enterprise Consortium, then I'd highly encourage you to think about it. It's really not that expensive. Another area that we're trying to emphasize in this kind of new space or new space industrial base realm is working with our partners in Air Force Research Lab and AFWERX, trying to build a pipeline of innovation that can take startups from low technology and low manufacturing readiness levels through operational testing and fielding. There's a bunch of different pipelines that we're using to try and integrate programs executed between Space and Missile Systems Center, AFWERX, and AFRL's Space Vehicle Directorate. Programs like the Space Force Accelerators Program, the SMC funded and executed Space Pitch Days, and then the AFWERX Space Challenge funded and designed by SMC's portfolio architect and strong partnership with Colonel Diller and his team and SAF-AQ, also with Colonel Eric Felt at AFRL. It's just really been remarkable how all of those things are coming together at this really special, exciting time in the new space realm. Many of you are aware, last November we held our first Space Pitch Day in San Francisco. We awarded $46 million to 30 companies on the spot. We're planning on doing something very similar to that in the spring of 21. More details to follow on that, but I would anticipate we'll be doing that in Los Angeles, and based on the status of the pandemic, then we may be doing it virtually. Also later this month, we're doing our very first International Space Pitch Day, where we partnered with the United Kingdom on the 16th and 17th of November to review startups, 15 different startups selected to make pitches during the event. These are companies from Australia, Canada, the UK, the US, and even India. We're looking to make small dollar awards to them, and something that we're clearly looking to grow in the future, especially with our allies and partners around the planet. I think these are just some highlights of the ways we're already engaging in the new space economies, setting ourselves up, trying to set ourselves up as worthy partners for small companies, trying to bring along with us our primes so that they can see these small companies in action, showing the small companies and some of the non-traditionals that we can get them funding quickly, and that we can prioritize some really game-changing capabilities that they may have in their portfolio. The contract award times, we're definitely seeing a drop in those. Kind of the traditional acquisition process is, I don't want to say it's out the door, but we're trying to do everything we can to make these awards as rapid as possible. So even in the traditional timelines, under 6 months and falling is kind of the environment that we see ourselves in. And so when you look in total at Space Accelerator, Space Pitch Day, Space Challenge, 143 awards totaling $130 million through SBIRs and other transaction authorities, $47 million in traditional contract awards. And this doesn't even include the SpEC awards that we've made over the last couple of years. And because of these investments that we're making, the private sector is taking notice. And so we estimate that a lot of these companies have garnered an additional almost $150 million in venture capital because they've traversed our innovation ecosystem, if you will. We're capturing lessons learned. We're trying to keep the momentum going. as you know, as was mentioned up front, you know, we spend about $9 billion a year here at Space and Missile Systems Center on space capabilities. So, you know, $130 million in Space Accelerator, Space Pitch Day, and Space Challenge isn't a whole lot. But that combined with all of the SpEC awards, where we're also trying to prioritize startups and non-traditionals, we think makes it game-changing for the industrial base. And we're really looking to grow our authorities and structures to make that agility more prevalent and to take advantage of both the strategic and the commercial landscapes that we see out there. You know, to quote an NSSA study from earlier this summer, at the speed of relevance, right? The alternate acquisition report for space that I know many of you are tracking is still clearing some hurdles in the interagency. As I've said in the past, I wish I could snap my fingers and magically get the report approved and officially on its way to the Hill, but I think we're pretty confident at this point that we're in the home stretch. I know many of you have seen the features that we put in the draft report. Those features are very consistent with the June of 20 report that I mentioned previously from NSSA, and so we're very proud of the fact that seemingly independently, we kind of came up with the same things that industry associations like NSSA was able to put out there. And as I look through, you know, my marked up version of your report, I can say check, check, check a lot of times based on how consistent they are. We still have to go through a lot of thoughtful discussion towards getting through the kind of the final parts of the alternate acquisition report and the features in there. And then I think that that report will then drive some, you know, a space acquisition system that is unlike any other. And as the CSO, General Raymond, likes to say, we want to be the envy of all the services. It's a really exciting time to be in space. As many of you know, I'm really excited to be here with you all today. But that really concludes the kind of the things that I wanted to talk about up front, which is, hey, please talk about the threat when you're out there. Please take a hard look at the innovation and accelerator pitch day challenge events that we've got, trying to bring the new space economy into defense. The preeminent space power on and above the planet, and protect that global commons of space for ourselves and our allies. Thanks very much, and it's with my pleasure that I take your questions. I guess back to you,
Thanks,
JR.
General, and thanks for a great perspective and strategic overview and outlook for us. That from the 75 folks now on the call with us, they really appreciate that, and that helps us sort of drive the day here as we talk about space acquisition. One of your comments are talking about commercial entrance to space was one of the questions actually on our deck here. And can you talk more about the entrance of Amazon and Microsoft, among others, and how national security space may change how we do things, how change the paradigm?
And as a defense industrial base that is, from my perspective and my organization's perspective, with a focus on space, the new entrants, whether they're small or, in the case of Google and Amazon, very, very large. And by the way, those are just two exemplars. I'm not being comprehensive in all of that. There's many people out there that are changing their roles, experimenting with new systems. You know, the SpaceX Starlink system is another one of those things that we are very, very carefully watching. I think that I would articulate it in a way similar to the iPad that I was using yesterday while I was teleworking, JR. The iPad was introduced, I think, in 2009. It might have been in 2010, but it was about a decade ago. And if you'd have told me a couple of weeks before the original iPad came out that there was going to be this kind of capability with applications so that I could do banking, I could do shopping, I could navigate my way around the planet, I could write the great, the next great American novel, I could do all of this stuff in a really flat form factor and take it with me wherever I went. I honestly wouldn't have been able to kind of get my head around that, right? So the iPad was really something that at the time I didn't know I needed. And now 10 years later, I don't think I could live without, right? And so I see the entry of Microsoft, Google, Amazon, SpaceX, a whole bunch of little startups that have aspirations to become Microsoft, Google, SpaceX, Amazon, and things like that. I see that as I don't really know everything that I want from those folks. I'm excited to see what they offer. I'm excited to see as they come in and they make presentations to us at a space pitch day, or whether I maybe just encounter them at a virtual conference, run by the Space Symposium or the Space Foundation or whatever. I'm excited to hear what they're doing in artificial intelligence, what they're doing in machine-to-machine learning, what they're doing in orbital assessments of environments from a remote sensing perspective. Now, I may think of those things from the standpoint of, well, I wonder how I could use that to the benefit of the space warfighter within the United States Space Force. But I haven't really thought through a lot of those things. And so it's really, really interesting to see, like in the small launch community, and there's so many different providers there. I'd be embarrassed to mention even a couple, because then I'd have 98 of them calling me and saying, how come you didn't mention me? But the concepts of being able to rapidly replenish, especially in low Earth orbit, to be able to put up one-of-a-kind prototyping innovative capabilities in kind of a unwarned way, to be able to launch from locations around the planet that are, how does my force design potentially impact the ConOps tactics, techniques, and procedures that the space warfighter is going to use into the future? I've had so many great conversations with the companies that you mentioned and so many others in the smaller variety, that they have so many great ideas. It's actually exciting, but it's a challenge to sift through all of those different opportunities as something that, looking at something that, hey, do I need that in the Space Force now, or should I wait a couple of more years for it to mature? I hope that addresses your question, JR.
It does, sir, and that's an audience member question as well. And as we pivot from where the commercial entrants are, a lot of folks have gone on record, from General Hyten to General Raymond to Will Roper, many folks, that there are many issues with the current space requirements we see today, and the acquisition processes that really continue to slow down the department's ability to build good, resilient, dependable, affordable space-based capabilities, things that those space warfighters need. What are some of those changes, sir, that you would propose to remedy these issues to positively impact not only SMC as a transition to SSC, but the Space Force and, let's face it, the joint warfighter in the long term? We'd love to hear your opinion on that, sir.
Yeah, so that's a great question, JR. So whoever from the audience may have asked that, kudos to them. Our adversaries like China have an advantage with their command economy, where the government can dedicate huge amounts of resources to their strategic programs. They can share data between those strategic programs from an intellectual property perspective, and nobody really complains about that when they do, right? Our advantage, though, here in the West is our free market, where we're able to rapidly innovate, develop unique solutions to hard problems, turn on a dime of the market a little bit faster than some of our adversaries, and take advantage of the really brilliant people that we have that are working in this space right now. We in the Space Force, and specifically for space acquisition, we really want to fully leverage that innovation, free market, unique solutions opportunity that we have. And so we really need to rethink how we do business. When we did the SMC 2.0 re-architecture out here at the center, one of the ways I characterized it was we needed to move away from a legacy program of record, industrial base kind of mindset to something more akin to a modern business, right? Something more Google-ish or Amazon-ish like we talked about earlier. And we think we have a unique opportunity now with the stand-up of the new service. Thanks for the part that you played in that, JR. And the fact that the Space Force, no matter how important the capabilities that we provide, not just from a space warfighting capability, but from a enabling other warfighting capabilities, really only represents a little bit less than 2% of the total DoD budget. And if you just look at the investment budget, it's around 4% of the investment budget. What a great little niche to be able to experiment in, right? So in terms of those experiments, and I won't go through all of the features in the alternate acquisition reports, but things like a delegation of space acquisition program decisions outside of the Pentagon into the field to, empower the space professionals out here to let them go faster. I mean, we got to trust our people. They have the right training. They have the right experience. And we need to allow them to take ownership of program decisions outside of the Pentagon. Now, that doesn't mean run with scissors, right? One of the things that we preached under SMC 2.0, and we will continue to preach in a space acquisition system and in a space systems command, is speed with discipline and transparency, right? So a lot of times as we propose things in the trade space, whether it's additional delegations or additional authorities in the field, people think we're trying to do things with and be less transparent about what we've done in the past. We would like a space acquisition system that's fast, that has discipline, in other words, not running with scissors, but also one that is more transparent than maybe has been prevalent in the past across the space acquisition portfolio. And in other words, how can we improve that transparency? We also need a very, very strong unity of effort, right? And I would be surprised if today I didn't get some questions about all of the different space acquisition organizations and how are you going to keep them all rowing in the same direction. But there's lots of features in the report. JR, I know you've seen the report, and I suspect most other people have, but managing our programs at the portfolio level to allow flexibility between those programs financially that empowers the Space Force to adapt and respond to changes in the threat. Being able to flexibly define usable end items for procurement programs. So in other words, being able to separate out the bus, the component or the hosted payload, the sensor, the constellation, the data associated with it, so we can increase competition across the sub-elements of programs, strengthen the supply chain, allow for more innovation. The development with our stakeholders, not just in a vacuum, but with OSD and others like OMB and others, space acquisition policy that streamlines decision points for space development programs, and as I mentioned before, increases transparency with real-time program data. And then finally, you talked about the requirements earlier. General Hyten and his team have been very helpful in keeping that joint staff requirement validation at the highest levels on a couple of our key programs. So that enables us to more quickly and more flexibly develop the details required or the detailed requirements required to deliver the program. We're looking at executing that much more broadly beyond the missile warning work that we've already done in that respect. I think as just a final point on the alternate acquisition report and some of the features in it, most of the features that we propose either have current or historical precedent across the DoD or in the IC. And so where I'd like to tell you that, you know, there's a huge new idea that's never been heard of before in the alternate acquisition report, I think you'd be, well, you'd throw the party foul flag on me there. There's really not a lot of new in there, but we think that the collection of those features, whether we implement them broadly across the Space Force, or perhaps if we even do some prototyping or piloting of those kinds of authorities in the report, will really accelerate our delivery of new systems and really improve our our acquisition agility across the board. So we're really excited about the opportunity to get after the report. As you know, JR, out of the 9 features that were in the draft report, we've already implemented 2 of them. United States Space Force top line budget is complete or in the process of being complete. And then one of the more, contracting unique features in the report was something called Head of Contracting Authority, and pulling that authority out of the Pentagon and into the field. And so our HCA authority was delegated from Dr. Roper down to Miss Joy White, who's my executive director here at Space and Missile Systems Center. And she's building that field level HCA capability. And by the way, she's a fully qualified and expert in contracting. That's her background before she was my executive director. And so she and her team in our Atlas Corps here at SMC are building a process that not just SMC, but the entire Space Force will be able to take advantage of in terms of getting contracting authority decisions faster, business clearance decisions faster in the field. So I hope that addressed your question, JR. Sorry if I got on a little my high horse there, rambling on, but I think that that was a great question, and I think if we implementation of that report, that it'll be a really, really big win for the Space Force and all of our advocates, including our industry partners.
Great, General. Thank you, sir. And please don't think, I'm looking at multiple screens here, getting a bunch of questions flowing in. We probably could do this for 3 hours, but I know you don't have 3 hours. Speaking of running with scissors, Colonel Russ Tehan, who regularly runs with scissors, is your partnerships guy, but he's got about 5 full-time jobs. Does the center need a commercial or an innovation type think tank to more thoughtfully hear for and brainstorm what the innovators are doing? Pitch days are good, but government and traditional industry, new space startups and commercial, we all want to come in together to talk to you. And poor Russ is a one-armed paper hanger. He just can't do it all together. So just want your comments then there, sir. And I've got a follow-up from General Lyles as well. We'll keep moving here. So
great. Hey, so that's a great question. Whoever asked that question, I bet you got put up to that question by Colonel Tehan, right? And so just to make sure, I can't share the details with you right now, but I will tell you that under all of the COAs that we are currently reviewing with the Chief of Space Operations, having within the Space Systems Command, we'll just say more nodes for you to interact with, whether you're a new start business or you've got an innovation idea, or you're an important international ally that would like to partner up with us on some sort of diversity in one of our constellations. All of that is in the works. I think that you'll be very happy with when you see the Space Systems Command lay down and how we are trying to create those opportunities for different partners and different kinds of partners to interact more broadly with the space acquisition community.
Got it. Thanks, sir, very much. And General Lyles actually came in with talking about sharing best acquisition practices. And he really specifically said he's interested in your thoughts on the importance or not of sharing best acquisition practices with the non-space acquisition domain. You've got experience there, sir, doing that. Your mandate as the commander of the Space Systems Command, obviously SMC, is to streamline how we develop and acquire space capabilities, but how can you share those streamlined processes with the other service under the Department of the Air Force? General would like to hear about that, sir, if you don't mind. And the
Yeah,
audience
so JR, just to clarify, I am still the Space and Missile Systems Center commander, and the Space Systems Command commander, because we don't have the final kind of roll card position description for that Space Systems Command commander established formally yet. The Space Systems Command commander will have to be nominated and confirmed for that role. So my job in the enterprise right now, working for General Raymond and working for Dr. Roper, our service acquisition executive, is to lay the foundation for that Space Systems Command and the kind of the roles and responsibilities of that Space Systems Command commander going forward. So that's what we're working on as part of that stand-up. We still, as I said earlier, we have a number of COAs in work with General Raymond that we'll need to get through him before we move on to Secretary Barrett and other senior decision makers relative to the stand-up of that Space Systems Command. But as it turns out, in terms of sharing ideas and best practices, lessons learned with the non-space community, and this is specifically for General Lyles if he's listening in, no way, sir, we're keeping all the good ideas to ourselves, right? Seriously, I'm just kidding. Of course, you know, I interact with non-space entities on more than a weekly basis, right? I'm talking to General Bunch or General Schaefer from Air Force Materiel Command. I'm talking to the other PEOs in Air Force Materiel Command, the Life Cycle Management Center, and the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center. Dr. Roper does a fantastic job of kind of keeping us in G together. So like, for instance, many of you are aware, last week we did our biennial PEO roundtable and CEO roundtable, where we shared ideas on DevSecOps, on ABMS, on digital engineering across all of our enterprises. And so those connections, which I have you know, very much valued over my first 3.5 years in this position, have only gotten stronger thanks to Dr. Roper, thanks to Chief Raymond and the leadership team that we have here at SMC for making those connections really, really tight and learning from them as they learn from us. I think maybe a more interesting area where we definitely need to show more synergy is just within space acquisition itself. As many of you are aware, we've got a lot of different, we've got the Department of the Air Force RCO, we've got the Space RCO, we've got the C4 ISR folks at MDA, we've got Space Development Agency, we've got our partners in the interagency in the NRO, and many other space acquisition organizations. We recently stood up, General Raymond has talked a lot about it, our Program Integration Council, or our PIC, to bring together the PEOs and senior leaders from across the DAF and the NRO to collaborate on acquisition programs that we know will overlap, but also to share lessons learned with each other on what the right way to go is. It's not a directive organization, it's more of a collaboration forum. It enables us to share ideas and plans to avoid duplication of effort and discover points of mutual support. So in order to avoid 5 years from now, you know, every weapon system, no matter who it's delivered by on the floor of the NSDC, in order to avoid everybody having their own separate box of capability on the NSDC floor, we've got to be able to integrate that together. But we also recognize the kind of the lanes in the road, right? You know, everybody brings a different set of capabilities. The Space RCO, Space Layer, Black World programs of record, right? The DAF RCO brings to the fight multi-domain programs of record, also all Black World. SMC brings to the fight, while we bring to the fight a number of important programs of record that we've got to get doing, we have to stitch things together with Enterprise Ground Services, Space C2 efforts, and launch. We also have our own Black World portfolio, frankly, that the expertise is in turning the prototyping done from DAF RCO and Space RCO into production programs and then sustaining those programs. SDA brings to the fight kind of that disruptive commercial tech that we're hoping will close some gaps for us in things like a space transport layer. So that Program Integration Council, and we meet monthly, we recognize everybody's expertise, we coordinate with each other. There are definitely areas like space control where we see some overlap of the Venn diagrams of the responsibilities of the organizations, and that's where those Venn diagrams overlap is where we really get involved in some really, critical conversations for our nation, I guess is the best way I can put it in this forum, Unclass. It's really been remarkable that teamwork that we have with all of our partners there. And so I'm looking forward to growing that throughout the rest of SMC's tenure. And then as the Space Systems Command is established and begins to grow, I think that's another opportunity to make sure everybody, as I mentioned before, has unity of effort and is rowing in the same direction.
That's a great segue, sir. In fact, a question came in as you were speaking. Two questions. One was on how do you manage all the multiple acquisition organizations? I think you've covered that really succinctly. The other question that came in is, as SSC stands up, do you see it evolving over time to a greater reliance on civil service engineering staff and less reliance on the officer side or uniformed officers who transfer in and out at high frequency? It all depends how the system works out, obviously, with the new structure. But do you see it coming more like an AFMC model or like an AFMC model? It's a great question from the audience.
Yeah, I do. I do agree that is a great question, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to straddle the fence here and give you well, I don't know. It's a TBD kind of an answer, but I will tell you that there are within my tenure here at SMC, I will tell you there are definitely strengths to the organic workforce that we have within SMC, and I would maybe make that a little bit broader and also include the other space acquisitions organizations that I answered about in the previous, or that I mentioned in the previous question. There are definitely strengths in terms of the 50-50 kind of mix that I have military and civilian, organic civilian. It is it creates a robust environment that is both people can come in and get and leave in a couple of years or 3 years or 4 years and get, keep their breadth going. But you can also have, in the case of Department of the Air Force civilians, a great amount of depth in a particular mission area or a particular functional area like engineering or contracting or, remote sensing or whatever. We obviously rely much more heavily in the space acquisition community on STE provided from our FFRDC partners, particularly the systems engineering FFRDC partners like Aerospace and MITRE. And that is incredible partnership that we have with them, and the technical capabilities that they bring are absolutely world-class. But as we begin to establish a Space Systems Command, we're going to need to make sure that we grow some technical chops ourselves from the government perspective. Many of you know Bill LaPlante, who used to be the Air Force SAE, and his concept of owning the technical baseline. And I would love to see us, particularly in mission areas, maybe not within program execution channels, but in mission area integration, in systems of systems engineering. I would very much like to own the technical baseline a little bit more strongly than I do today. And I think my space acquisition partners in MDA, NRO, RCO, Space RCO, SDA would agree with me in that perspective, in that the government really needs to have the expertise and not rely on services support as much as we currently do.
That's great, General, and thank you for being frank with us. I mean, that's what we're trying to do today, is to hear your true opinions, and that's very helpful for us. A couple of other questions did come in. Specifically, what is the status of standing up the Assured Access organization, and that operators and acquisition will be bringing bundled together? Is that going to happen? It's a great question from the audience, if you've got a moment to address that.
Yeah, so as you see the communications that we've made about the Space Systems Command, not just in the media, but over to the Hill, obviously the Space and Missile Systems Center, the Space Force Commercial Satellite Communications Office, the Launch Enterprise are the things that we are prioritizing for moving into the first tranche of the Space Systems Command. There could be other Department of the Air Force and DoD organizations that become part of that over time. It depends on the COA that we select and the timing of the execution of that COA. But we're really excited to bring the Launch Enterprise sort of back into the fold. For those of you who can remember back a couple of decades, we're excited to bring those capabilities back into the fold, to be partnered with and paired with the Launch Enterprise, the acquisition and mission assurance expertise that we have here at SMC. It'll be a tremendous amount of responsibility and I think good news from a Assured Access to Space organization. I wish I could talk to you about the details of what that Assured Access to Space organization looks like, but as I mentioned, we still have a couple of different courses of action in play, and so I don't want to give you the details of one and then have senior leadership pick the other, right? So about all I can say beyond that, I hope this addresses the question, is if you take the elements of launch ops now and think about ways to efficiently and effectively combine them with the launch enterprise, the acquisition function, the SPO, if you will, for launch, that's what we're looking at in terms of what's the best way to organize, train, and equip that, make sure the authorities flow properly. And just like we've said in many of our other forums, and we've said in this event today, pushing authority as far down in the organization as possible. In other words, this isn't an attempt to centralize planning and centralize execution at high levels in the Pentagon or at the SSC. It's an efficient way to effectively allocate our nation's assured access to space capabilities and make sure that the expertise is as close to the launch pad as possible.
And still following the congressional mandate, serve, minimize bureaucracy. Well done. Good job.
You gotcha.
I wish we could put that on the front of the, we're refined today, but there you go.
I'm not going to take my tunic off, JR, but I'm wearing a t-shirt that says that.
Outstanding, sir. Good. We'll put a bumper sticker on there for you. We've got time, sir, probably for one last question, and this comes from the audience as well. And how will Space Force itself, as well as SMC, prioritize use of commercial services in this arena the way some companies in the past, like Intelsat, SES, and Iridium, are doing services for the warfighter? We've got just a few minutes, sir. We're very mindful of your time. If you could just discuss that, and we'll turn it back to Steve.
Yeah, so Just like your question earlier, JR, about are we thinking as we stand up a Space Systems Command, are we thinking about different touch points for innovation and allies and things like that? Right now, I think a lot of people, especially the SATCOM providers that are on the line, are very aware of Claire Grayson and the Space Force Commercial Satellite Communications Office, which has already come into SMC from an OT&E perspective and will be part of the Space Systems Command. As we build out the Space Systems Command, I firmly believe that our commercial services and using a working capital fund to access them with the potential to have large IDIQ contracts and things like that, where there's a number of qualified providers, I think that commercial solutions goes well beyond SATCOM. And so as you look about getting environmental data from space, as you look about how to do timing as a service from space, if you're looking at a diverse PNT architecture, the Commercial Solutions Office of the Space Systems Command will play a much larger role than SATCOM. And I'm really looking forward to that opportunity, because I think that gives us the ability not just to support the warfighter, the joint warfighter and various different combatant commands, but also gives us the opportunity to make sure all of our industrial partners have kind of a one-stop shop to go to if they have a commercial solution to provide.
That's great, General. And again, sir, thank you for your frank and open comments today with us. The 70 or so folks on the call today really appreciate it. We appreciate your space professionals sitting in LA and across the world, as well as you, sir, as a national treasure for what we do for the space warfighting domain. And I'd like to turn it over now, General, to Steve Jakes for some closing comments. Again, great to see you, sir. We'll catch up in the future, I'm sure. Steve,
thanks,
it's all
JR.
yours. Thank
Looking
you,
forward
sir.
to seeing you soon.
Yes, sir.
Mask to mask.
Yes, sir, of course.
Sir, echoing JR's comments, we really do appreciate your leadership and your perspectives today. Spectacular as always, sir. The bar is always high when you're on at the microphone, so we really appreciate all that. And JR, to you, never say no, JR. Always out there to help the association. NSSA member company Parsons is brother JR. And your once partner in crime, Colin Lee. Colin, if you're still out there listening, we're thinking about you, pal. And to all you folks for taking the time today to hear General Thompson's perspectives today, we really thank you for all of that. I'll close with two messages to everybody. One is upcoming space-time events. Cybersecurity is a big topic, so as much as we don't want to talk about it, it is critical. Next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, Bob Metzger is a legal expert in CMMC, and he will teach us everything we need to know. That comes up at 11 o'clock next Tuesday on November 10th. He's going to tell you what you need to know. The following week, backed by popular demand, this will be our first attempt at an SCI level space-time webinar. Oh boy, it'll be on IC Connect. It'll be our threats session. You heard General Thompson talk about the continuous threats on our systems. So John Huth from DIA and Jeff Gossel from NASIC will be speaking to us at the SCI level. We'll have more details on the logistics of that coming up. For those of you folks who do have SCI clearances but don't have the facility, let Lexi know and we'll do the best we can to pair you all up. So, and we have a couple other ones coming up. We will have a full slate through the holidays, up to the Christmas holidays. And so stay tuned and keep an eye on our email blast coming your way. The second topic is membership. Thanks to our growing list of members, we're up now to 9 cosmic members by last count. Our members are all a part of the progress of and the success of the association is because of our strong membership. JR is an example of that today. As General Thompson mentioned, we popped out our own acquisition report, and I will affirm to you all that we wrote our papers totally not knowing anything that General Thompson and his team were writing about. And it turns out there was quite a correlation between our messages, but that was written by our members. Similarly, we recently put out a security report. I call it the SAP spaghetti factory that we have to contend with in our world. Endorsed by INSA, USGIF, and the contractor SAP Security Working Group. We cycled that paper across the E-ring and the Pentagon. All the security folks there fully endorse it. And we're in the process now of drafting a paper that will be designed to go to the new administration, whomever wins, advocating strongly that as we look forward, that we work hard as a country to strengthen our national security space enterprise. Whether it be Title 10, Title 50, we are all on board with everything there. So all this is to say, for those of you who aren't members yet, why not get on board, be part of the solution, support our government customers, and love to have you join NSA soon. So in passing, or in closing, thanks to everybody for being here. Joe, you can nod and say bye-bye as well. Once again, Joan Thompson, thanks a million. We really do appreciate it. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Get out to vote.
Get out to vote.
Yes,
exactly. Everybody go vote.
Cheers.
Take care.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Joe.